Have you ever wondered where the roots of the Israel-Palestine conflict lie? Let's journey back in time to find the genesis of this intricate and persisting conflict. The tale begins in the late 19th century with the rise of the Zionist movement. This was a time when the Jewish people scattered across the globe yearned for a place they could call home. Inspired by the idea of national self-determination, they turned their gaze towards Palestine, a region seen as their ancestral homeland. At this point, it's important to understand that this land was already populated predominantly by Arab Muslims, with a small Christian and Jewish minority. So the Zionist dream of establishing a Jewish homeland was bound to encounter resistance. Then came the Balfour Declaration in 1917. Arthur Balfour, the British Foreign Secretary, issued this document promising the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. This was a turning point in the history of the region. Following the First World War, Britain took control of Palestine under a League of Nations mandate. The British were tasked with implementing the Balfour Declaration, but their double-dealing diplomacy had also promised the Arabs independence for their support against the Ottoman Empire during the war. Under the British mandate, Jewish immigration to Palestine increased dramatically. Aided by the horrors of anti-Semitism and the Holocaust in Europe, Jews sought refuge in Palestine. This influx led to a demographic shift and growing land disputes, causing tensions to escalate between the Jewish immigrants and the Arab population. The British, unable to reconcile the conflicting promises made to the Jews and the Arabs and faced with escalating violence, decided to leave Palestine in 1947, passing the problem onto the United Nations. So it appears the seeds of conflict were sown during the British Mandate era. This was the genesis of a conflict that would shape the future of the Middle East, leading to a series of events that continue to affect the lives of millions today. It's a story that's more than a century old, yet it continues to unfold, as complex and contentious as ever. How did the birth of a nation lead to the first Arab-Israeli war? In the aftermath of World War II, the United Nations faced the task of addressing the Jewish refugee crisis. The solution they proposed was the UN Partition Plan of 1947. This plan envisaged the division of Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem under international administration. On May 14, 1948, the plan came into effect. David Ben-Gurion, the head of the Jewish Agency, declared the establishment of the State of Israel. The birth of this new nation was met with jubilation by many Jews around the world, but for the Arab nations, this was a cause for alarm. Almost immediately, a coalition of Arab states, including Egypt, Syria, Jordan, and Iraq, launched a military campaign against Israel. This was the first Arab-Israeli war. The conflict was marked by fierce battles, strategic maneuvers, and widespread displacement of people. The war had devastating effects. It resulted in a massive refugee crisis, with hundreds of thousands of Palestinians fleeing or being expelled from their homes. This exodus, known as the Nakba, or catastrophe in Arabic, is still a source of deep sorrow and anger for Palestinians today. The war ended in 1949 with a series of armistice agreements between Israel and the Arab states. These agreements established what is known as the Green Line, a demarcation line marking the boundary between Israel and its neighbors. However, these boundaries were far from being universally accepted and have been a persistent source of conflict. The birth of Israel and the First Arab-Israeli War set the stage for a series of conflicts in the region. The UN Partition Plan, the Declaration of Israel, and the ensuing war marked a pivotal moment in the history of the Middle East. These events laid the groundwork for the tangled and complex narrative of the Israel-Palestine conflict that we see today. The birth of Israel and the ensuing war marked the beginning of a series of conflicts. How have the wars and peace attempts shaped the Israel-Palestine conflict over the years? The answer to that question lies in understanding the major wars and peace attempts that have punctuated the decades-long conflict. One of the most significant wars was the Six-Day War of 1967. This war saw Israel seize control of the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. The territories captured during this war are still a major point of contention today. Then came the Yom Kippur War of 1973. Egypt and Syria, backed by other Arab states, launched a surprise attack on Israel on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. Despite initial losses, Israel managed to push back the invading forces, but the war led to a shift in the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. The Lebanon War in 1982 saw Israel invade Lebanon with the aim of expelling the Palestinian Liberation Organization. The war resulted in a protracted Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon, eventually leading to Israel's withdrawal in the year 2000. In between these wars, attempts were made to broker peace. The Camp David Accords of 1978, brokered by US President Jimmy Carter, saw the signing of a peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. This was a significant milestone, marking the first time an Arab nation recognized Israel. Then there were the Oslo Accords in the 90s, a series of agreements between Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization. These accords established a framework for future negotiations and led to mutual recognition between the two parties. However, the accords fell short of addressing key issues such as the status of Jerusalem, refugees, and borders. These wars and peace attempts have shaped the conflict in profound ways. They've redrawn borders, altered political landscapes, and sparked hope for peace, only to see it extinguished by continued violence and disagreement. The conflict is a complex tapestry of historical grievances, territorial disputes, and political maneuvering. Despite numerous wars and peace attempts, a permanent solution has remained elusive. The Israel-Palestine conflict continues to be a tinderbox, a complex and volatile issue that demands careful, nuanced understanding. What role have the Intifadas played in the present-day conflict? To understand this, let's delve into the first Intifada, which erupted in 1987. This was a sustained series of Palestinian protests and violent clashes fueled by decades-long grievances against Israeli occupation. The uprising humanized the Palestinian struggle for many around the world, casting a stark light on the harsh realities of occupation. In the midst of this turmoil, the rise of Hamas, a Palestinian political and military group, was a game-changer. Unlike the Palestinian Liberation Organization, Hamas rejected any compromise with Israel. It sought to establish an Islamic state in Palestine, further intensifying the volatility of the conflict. Fast forward to the year 2000, the Second Intifada, also known as the Al-Aqsa Intifada, was marked by a more militarized and deadly form of resistance. Suicide bombings and violent reprisals became the harrowing norm, leading to a significant toll on both sides. These events have had a profound impact on the conflict, shaping the dynamics of power and resistance and influencing the present-day issues. Israeli settlements in the West Bank, for instance, have been a contentious issue. These settlements, considered illegal by international law, have been a source of constant friction, exacerbating the sense of injustice felt by Palestinians. Then there's the status of Jerusalem, a city sacred to both Jews and Muslims. Its status remains one of the thorniest issues in the conflict. Israel claims the entire city as its capital, while Palestinians seek East Jerusalem as the capital of a future state. The blockade of the Gaza Strip imposed by Israel and Egypt has further intensified the conflict. Ostensibly a security measure, the blockade has had a devastating impact on Gaza's economy and the livelihood of its people, stirring resentment and desperation. The Intifadas have thus played a significant role in shaping the present-day conflict, adding new dynamics and complexities. They've highlighted the profound grievances of the Palestinian people and the harsh realities of occupation. They've also underscored the deep-seated animosity and mistrust that continue to fuel this conflict. The Intifadas and the ongoing issues have only added more layers to this complex conflict. Scene script. Who holds responsibility in this enduring conflict? It's a question that echoes through the corridors of global diplomacy, reverberates in the chambers of the United Nations, and lingers in the hearts and minds of those directly impacted by the Israel-Palestine conflict. This is not a black and white issue. It's a kaleidoscope of grays, a complex tapestry woven with threads of history, religion, politics, and human suffering. Both Israelis and Palestinians bear some level of responsibility, as do the international community and the UN. Yes, there have been actions and reactions from both sides that have fueled the conflict. There's been a multitude of missed opportunities, from peace deals that fell through to ceasefires that were broken. There's been a persistent failure to fully acknowledge and respect the other's rights, fears, and aspirations. All these have contributed to the complexity and the enduring nature of the conflict. But let's not forget the role of the international community. The world has watched, often helplessly, sometimes contributing to the problem rather than the solution. The UN, despite its numerous resolutions and peacekeeping missions, has been unable to broker a lasting peace. The superpowers, with their own geopolitical interests, have often exacerbated the conflict rather than helping to resolve it. And amidst all this complexity, there's a stark, heartbreaking reality: the suffering of people on both sides, the loss of innocent lives, the fear and insecurity, the displacement and the trauma. These are the true casualties of this conflict. In the end, the complexity of the Israel-Palestine conflict defies simplistic narratives or blame games. What's clear is the need for understanding, dialogue, and a just solution that respects the rights and aspirations of both Israelis and Palestinians. The path to peace is fraught with challenges, but it's a journey that must be undertaken for the sake of humanity, for the sake of justice, and for the sake of a future where Israelis and Palestinians can coexist peacefully in their shared homeland.